Hello again, friend. Glad you joined me once again. Just so you know, I still have my computer screen up here in front of me, and so I can have some notes if I need to, so I can stay on track. As I said in our last visit, I was going to talk with you, discuss with you why clean food costs more. Why is the expense more? From our last conversations, I hope that you realize that I'm not talking about organic. I'm talking about clean food. So why does it cost more? So I want to start off by saying that I think it's the wrong way to look at it. I'll explain. When Kirsten and I get on when we get on the subject, and it happens often when we go to a place like, any grocery store, Kroger, Meijer, Walmart, whatever, and we see products there that are so cheap, and we go, how is that so cheap? How can that be so cheap? We have no understanding of how that food can be that cheap. So I say that because that's a different take, right? So we're looking at the same point, whatever that point may be, the cost. And from one point of view, you go, well, why is clean food so expensive? And we look at regular grocery store and say, how can that be so cheap? Holy crud, how can that be so cheap? And so I hope that I have begun to convince you of the idea that cheap food isn't good. And I'm saying cheap versus inexpensive on purpose. I hope that you get the difference without me going into a long soliloquy of cheap versus inexpensive. It's cheap. It's not good. So how is it so cheap? I don't know. I don't know how it can be. How can that be possible? I have a list here that I typed out. So, I said a farmer's got to grow that at some point in time, and it has to be, I'm just reading what is below here, and it has to be minimally processed, which we talked about last time about with lettuce. That's minimal processing. And to conduct those processes, it has to be done in some kind of facility, in a barn, in a warehouse, something. You have to do that indoors, and you have to have the equipment, which is all going to be stainless steel, which they don't give away. And they have to purchase the chemicals. They have to, for the processes, they have to pay for the tainted effluent. The water has hydrochloric acid in it for lettuce, and then it's rinsing off who knows what off from the lettuce, and that has to be treated. You can't just run that out on the ground. That gets people pretty excited when you put hydrochloric acid on the ground, and as well it should. And so the effluent, the labor, the packaging, the grocery store, the building of the grocery store and its employees, the trucking, the warehousing, on and on and on and on and on. All of these things, how can it be that cheap? We don't know. We don't understand it. How can it be that cheap? So how can that be? I don't know. And so kind of another idea right here that I'll throw out. I didn't even think of it when I was writing everything, the everything that's below. But oh no, the thought just left me. Boy, it was a dandy too. Hooey. Sorry, forget that. If I knew how to do the video stuff, I'd clip this part out, but I don't know how. So we'll just keep going along. So why is clean food more expensive? All right, so I go through and I switch from talking about lettuce to talking about chicken, because chicken is near and dear to my heart right now, because that's all we grow. We stopped growing lettuce and vegetables. Wow, that's a lot of effort. When you find a good farmer for vegetables, man, pay them and thank them and support them, and whatever that they have, just help them. All right, because that's a lot of stinking work. So let's just talk about chicken real quick. All right, so I'm going to start by talking about grocery store chicken. Grocery store chickens are grown inside in the dark, in foul, nasty, stinky, dry poop, dust filled air. And the chickens live in those dark barns. I'll get into the reason why they're dark in just a moment. Their whole lives, they are put in those teeny little barns, or those as teeny little chicks, into those great big dark barns, and they live out their whole miserable life, and it's miserable in that disgusting, horrible environment. And so the other thing is, I'm just going to keep going. I'm looking at my screen so I stay on point, because I get rolling. They live, the floor is generally consists of what they call litter. Well, litter is just the poop from all of the chickens that were in that building, in that shed before, and they didn't clean it up. I don't know their processes. They are really tight-lipped about that, and it's really hard to figure it out. I know they clean them out once in a while, but I don't know how often. And it certainly isn't after every group. So those little chicks are in that barn, and there's about 30,000 chickens in one building at a time. And they all live in that same dark, stinky building. And it's dark. The reason it's kept dark is because chickens are really quite inquisitive animals. They like to explore. They like to find out what's around. They're really quite active animals. And when it's dark, they can't see to move around. So why do huge chicken producers like Tyson and Purdue and Miller and fill in the blank, whomever you want, why do they have their buildings dark, and why do they not want their chickens to move around? Well, it takes energy to move, right? And so if the chicken isn't using the energy to move, then it can use the energy to make meat. And that's why they're growing the chicken, is for it to make meat. It's a little living, they treat them like they're little living robots, little machines, meat making machines. And that's how they view their animals. Of course, you'll never get them to say that, but when you look at their practices, then that's clearly what they do. They don't care for them. So they're living in the dark so that they don't move around, because that wastes energy and doesn't put weight on or meat on their little frames. So they keep it dark. And they're not moving around, and they have enough light to see to move around enough to find the feeder and to find water. And there's always feed. They never, ever, ever don't have feed. And the idea that they have is they want, when that chicken is awake, that it goes over and eats and gets a drink of water and goes back to sleep. And when it wakes up, it goes over and eats until it's full and gets a drink of water and goes back to sleep. And that's all it does. That's all that animal does. And that building is warm. It is hot. And the reason that they do that is also so that chicken, those animals, aren't wasting any of that energy to stay warm. Because that takes energy, and they want all of that energy to go into that little machine, that little meat making machine, for it to make meat. And because it's warm, they don't grow feathers. So growing feathers takes energy, and at at processing time, taking care of those feathers is a total pain. They go everywhere, and it's a job just taking care of the feathers. So they don't want feathers, so they keep it dark and they keep it warm, so that they don't have to waste that energy. And they have, those big buildings have huge fans. I did huge fans, like 3 or 4 fans on a building that are 6 feet across. And when it gets too hot to where the chickens are having to expend energy to stay cool, those fans kick on and it draws in some air from outside, just enough so that the temperature stays right, and then they turn back off. It isn't to change out the air so they have fresh air. They don't care. The producers don't care about their chickens being healthy. So everything is done so that that little machine, that little living machine, is totally efficient. It's as efficient as it can be. We don't do that. I don't raise my chickens that way. I don't treat them like a little machine. Okay? So where I brood my chickens, which is from the time that they're they're little, a couple days old, for the first couple weeks of their life, I have them in our greenhouse, in our hoop house, which obviously lets light in, and we have everything opened up in the summertime. All of the sides are rolled up and the doors are rolled up, so it's all fresh air in and out, and it's getting light and it's getting dark. And but we keep them in there so that they're a little bit protected when they're brand new. For about the first 5 days to a week, they really can't control their own temperature, so we need to give them an environment. It's about 90 degrees where they stay warm and comfortable. Otherwise, quite frankly, they die, and a dead chicken does not produce good meat. And then we take them out onto pasture after that, and they live in a pen with 100 other birds, 100 or less other birds. They're in a pen that is on pasture that we move twice a day onto fresh pasture, where they're getting, not only they're not living on poop, they're also able to eat fresh vegetation and fresh bugs, and they're able to explore a new area. And we have, in the summertime, we just have half of the top covered with a cover. It's Tyvek. So it's white Tyvek, so it reflects the sun so they don't get too hot. And then the sides are just covered in chicken wire, and the other half of the top's covered in chicken wire, so the air's flowing through. And they're living out there and having a good life. They eat, they run around. When they get older, they fight with each other because they're all males, and that's what we do. We fight when we hit adolescence, and just part of the deal. And they have a good life. They don't ever breathe nasty, stinky, dusty, smelly air. They're not living on other chickens' poop, let alone their own. So now I've given you an explanation of the growing systems, and now we can talk a little bit about the cost. So raising a chicken that's in the building, that's not expending any energy. I'm doing a building. This is a building. Walls, roof, okay, building. Trying to explain my hand gestures. They're living in a building where they don't grow feathers, and they're not expending any energy that they absolutely can be confined from expending, so that they make more meat. All right? I don't do that. I want them to express their chickenness. I want them to act like chickens. And so they're out in the open, and they're doing all those other things. I do a few other explanations here in the written document if you want to read it, but in the building, when they're conserving all of their energy, that's efficient, right? If they're awake and they're eating and then they're sleeping, that's efficient. The way I do it isn't efficient. It's good and it's right and it's proper, but it's not necessarily efficient. You know, the huge producers are producing those chickens for pennies a pound, and I'm producing chickens for dollars a pound. And there's, you know, it costs more to produce good food. It just does. It takes more work, it takes more effort, and you get less production, right? And that's one thing I forgot to mention is that you get less yield. You know, so that you can use yield by for vegetables. You can use yield for meat too, because you know we live off the ratio between what it costs and what we can get paid, and the price difference between the two is the little bit that we have left to pay our bills. So what I do is not as efficient. It is very efficient at producing a good bird and a good quality and good clean food, but it's not as good at being cheap, right? So what Tyson does, and I'm just using Tyson as like Kleenex, right? You know, you understand. Now, what Tyson does is monetarily efficient, but it's not good food. In fact, in the future, I'm going to break this all down in some detail and talk about, particularly about chicken, and the difference between the two. But it's, wait till you learn about this. It'll flip your wig. Just like the chicory root and the lettuce. Just wait. Holy man, it is disgusting. If you think the living environments are bad, wait till I go through the processing that they do to chicken meat and what you are eating when you buy that grocery store chicken and eat it. All right. So, I'm sorry, I'm just making sure I stay on track. So, clean food, whether we're talking about chicken, and I use chicken as example, and I hope that you can extrapolate that idea onto vegetables and beef and pork and fish. You know, let's just take fish. It's a real quick, easy one, right? It's far more efficient to raise wild fish when it's in a cage than it is to go out and start your boat up and start trolling waters and throwing out a hook to catch a fish. You know, one is the old adage, you know, it's fishing, it's not catching, right? So wild caught farmed fish is catching, it's not fishing, excuse me. So, but I hope that you're able to extrapolate the idea. The yield is way lower. The cost, how about that? The cost per whatever food, the cost per the amount of food that you eat is huge for clean because it has to be done by hand. And it doesn't have the pesticides applied to like vegetables. It doesn't have a dark barn for chickens and the dark barn and the bad air and the chickens living in their own filth and that they're treated so badly. I'll give you an example how bad they're treated. Have you ever wondered why grocery store chicken, the biggest one you can ever find is like 2.5 to maybe 3.5 pounds? They're just wee. If you ever, compared to the chickens we grow, they're really small, right? When I say wee, I mean like they're wee. They're just teeny. You ever wonder why that is? It's because they cannot keep those chickens alive longer. They are living in such bad conditions that they die if they stay alive longer. They have to process them. They have to kill them because if they keep them alive longer, then their living rates just decline at a tremendous steep fall off. They die. They can't live longer than that because it's so disgusting. All right, I can keep my chickens alive for a long time. They live fine out there. doesn't do anybody any good. So we harvest them at the right size. Let me go back to my notes here so I stay on point. So clean food isn't as efficient, but it's clean and it's good for you. So I try to, now I'm going to kind of change things a little bit. So let me change it to a different idea. So clean food costs more, and you might be saying, I don't care, Bob. That's not my problem. That's your problem. Well, yes, it is, but let me give you a few other ideas. Do you pick your doctor because he's cheap? Or do you pick your doctor because he's good and you pay the price? All right. Do you drive an unsafe car that's pumping carbon monoxide exhaust into the cab while you drive it because it's cheap? No, it would be poisoning you, and you don't want to be poisoned, so you don't buy that cheap car. Do you get where I'm going? You drive a car that has good brakes and a good exhaust system. I really put this in a great sentence here. A car with good brakes, good tires, and a good exhaust system costs more than the cheap one without those luxury items, right? So we think about clean food. We're taught, we are indoctrinated through marketing and through our whole society that clean food is a luxury item. Let's keep going. It's the difference between a car that's pumping exhaust into your cabin while you're driving it and eating cheap food that's full of hydrochloric acid and chicken poo is not a stretch. Is it? It's not a stretch. One's poison, the car is pumping poison in, and that food is pumping poison in. Just the same. All right? So eating bad food is eventually going to lead you to become diseased. It is. And you may retort, well, I have health insurance to pay for my sickness and my disease. Well, fine. I can't disagree with that. But the cost of disease is more than monetary. It's way more than monetary. It's the emotional stress that comes with a disease. The stress of, oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm going to do now. What if I die? If you've been keeping up with these messages and these discussions, you know that I gave you a paragraph of what things went through my mind when I was lucid, when I was so young and so sick. What are you going to do? Who's going to take care of my wife? Who's going to take care of my children? Who's going to take care of my parents and my in-laws when they get old? Who's going to teach my children how to live a good life? And who's going to take care of my grandchildren? And who gets to feed them ice cream? I want to do that. But if you get diseased, you don't get to do that. So what's the price of that, I ask you? Does clean, whole food that costs a little bit more, is it really that big of an expense? Is there nothing else that you cannot give up in your life that would pay for your health, to pay for you to not poison yourself and to not poison your family? There isn't any way that you can do that? Really? You'd rather eat hydrochloric acid and chicory root extract than to give up cable TV? I'd do it in a heartbeat. You never hear of some wealthy older person that laying on their deathbed that said, oh, I'm glad I got sick and I'm dying. I finally, right? No, they would give all of their money to have their health back. everything. They would give it all to have their health back. And their mate, their wife or their husband would give that times 10 to have their health back of their loved one. There's a way out. You don't have to do that. And that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to give examples, real life examples. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not even exaggerating. I'm just connecting dots of facts. It's that serious. I can't even explain to you how serious it is. Fresh vegetables are dipped in water with hydrochloric acid. You wouldn't put your hand in that, yet you eat it. What's up with that? And that's a fresh vegetable. Lettuce, for pity's sake. All right. In case you're wondering, it gets me wound up. What more do you have than your health? And when you don't have your health, what do you have? When you become diseased, you have nothing. Except now you're going to the doctor and wondering, quite frankly, when am I going to die? Well, why would you want to do that? I don't understand it. So one last point here. See, it's a good thing that I've got this thing in front of me because it keeps me from staying on that rant for longer. Just a moment. I'm just trying to give you information and shed light on it. It turns out it's the light of light and death, light of life and death. It's that serious. So I would like to ask a favor of you, please. Please help us. And I don't just mean buy our chicken, which, okay, buy our chicken. That would be great, but help us. Share this information, with your friends and with your neighbors and with your loved ones. And I don't even care if they live near to us here in Southeast Michigan, wherever it is. Get this information to them so that, the food buyer's guide, that can help them, show them how to find good food and how to find the proper food with the right questions and the right answers. And farmers, the biggest hurdle that we have as clean food farmers, and I don't mean just Kirsten and Joan and I mean as a group, clean food farmers, the biggest problem and the biggest hurdle we have is finding people to buy our food that we've put so much passion and so much of our life into. That's the hardest part, is to be able to sell our food. It doesn't seem reasonable, does it? Not especially now that you know some of the information that I know and that others know. Please help us. Share our information. Get the word out for us. Get it out for Kirsten and I, please. Help us sell our chicken. Help Tom and Vicky Zilke in Milan here sell their vegetables. Help Tantree. Help whomever. I'm sorry I'm drawing a blank on all the rest, but there are a lot of good farmers in this area that are doing a really good job, and they deserve your support. They're doing it for you so that you don't have to eat poison. All right? I have my email address at the bottom. Give it out to people. Have them send me an email. I'll get them on my list so that they can get the same information. They'll get the same thing flowing through to them, and they can get the same help. Just please spread the word. Please. If you don't want to look at the bottom, my email address is bob@happy-chickens.com. Bob at happy-chickens.com. It's plural. Chickens is plural. All right. I'll let you go. feel free to watch this again. Oh, and the other thing, if you would also help, if you wanted, if that'd be easier, YouTube. This is all being done on my YouTube channel. It's called Bob Heath. And all of these videos are right there, and they can watch them. And the more people watch those videos, the more they can be seen. It's just kind of the same thing as Google. Actually, it's owned by Google now, so you get ranked. And clean food, clean food, clean food. It costs a little more, but is it expensive? Right? How about that? It ain't cheap, but is it really expensive? How much does cheap food actually cost? What is the cost of it? How do you put a value to that? How do I put a value to getting to spend another day with my Kirsten, whom I love so dearly? How do I would pay dearly for that. And to not be sick, I'd pay dearly, and I hope you would too. All right, eat well. God bless you.